Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. In here, I will explain about Adeline Virginia Woolf Stephen in Orlando, 1928. My name is Erwin. I'm from Class B English Literature 2019. Introduction. Modern literature was an early European-dominated movement in the early 20th century which was marked by the revival of traditional aesthetic forms, representing the radical shift in cultural sensibilities during the period of war. Whereas modernist literature singles with the new world of subject matter brought about by an increasingly advanced and globalist world. Modern literature is a new style in English literature that is trying to get out of the phase of romanticism and realism. In this 20th century, the development of work after work met with various genres and distinctive themes that are told with unique storytelling technique has become one of the interesting material to be analyzed and studied more deeply. In the 20th century, work after work has evolved from time not to time, starting from poetry, prose, and essay written by some of the most famous writers of the era. Characteristic of 20th century literature juxtaposition, parallel, irony, and satire are elements found in the modern writing. The style of storytelling that is most characteristic of modern writing is that it is often found in the first-person narration style, in contrast to classical writing which has a beginning, middle, and end. Modern writing is narrated in a complex style and usually ends with a hanging climax. This leaves readers confused as to what they should take from the work. Modern writing is usually very difficult to understand because of the large amount of fragmentation and lack of consciousness of writing. The plot is made in such a way that it looks complex and seems fragmented. Common themes that are often referred to in this period are the rejection of history, social system, and loneliness. As in the intellectual and literary community, Woolf became a key figure in the Bloomsbury Group, a group of intellectuals and writers that also includes E.M. Forster and G.M. Keynes. Woolf's famous work, Mr. Dowley and To the Lighthouse, use a stream of consequence narrative that describe the perspective of the character with his daily activities with an emphasis on the context of the character's life and history with all the regions that pass by. The opening sentence of this novel has even become one of the most famous in the history of British literature. Another non-fiction work, A Room of One's Own, has established Woolf as one of the foremost feminist figures. A woman must have her own money and space for her to be able to write fiction. This aspect of her writing became one of the most famous quotes to describe women's independence. But Woolf's life ended tragically. During World War II, raging in Europe, Wolf fell into a deep depression. Unable to cope with his depression, Wolf put on the squad, filled his pocket with stone, and walked to the river Ausi on March 28, 1941. He then plunged into the river. Authorities found his body there weeks later. Despite his declining popularity after World War II, Wolf's work resonated with a new generation of readers during the feminist movement of the 1970s. Wolf remains one of the most influential writers of the 21st century. Author biography: Adeline Virginia Wolfe Stephen, 25 January 1882 until 28 March 1941, was an English writer considered one of the most important modernist writers of the 20th century and a pioneer in the use of stream consciousness as a narrative device. Wolfe was born into a wealthy family in South Kensington, London, the seventh child of Mother Julia Prinsep Jackson and Father Leslie Stephen, in a mixed family of 8 that include the modernist painter Vanessa Bell, and was homeschooled in English, classic, and Victorian literature from a young age. From 1897 to 1901. She attended the Ladies' Department of King's College London, where she studied classic and history and was in contact with the early reformers of women's higher education and the women's rights movement. An important part of London's literary and artistic society in 1950. He published his first novel, The Voyage Out, through his half-brother publisher, Gerald Duckworth and Company. His most famous work include the novels Mr. Dalloway, 1925, To the Lighthouse, 1927, and Orlando, 1928. He is also known for his essays, including A Room of 101, 1929, Wolfe became one of the central subjects of the feminist critique movement of the 1970s, and her work have garnered much attention and widespread commentary for inspiring feminists. His work have been translated into more than 50 languages. A large amount of literature is dedicated to his life and work, and he has been the subject of plays, novels, and films. Wolfe is commemorated today with a statue. A society dedicated to this work and a building at the University of London. Throughout his life, Wolfe was plagued by his mental illness. He was institutionalized several times and attempted suicide at least twice, according to Lassimer. 2004. The disease is characterized by symptoms that today would be diagnosed as bipolar disorder, for which there was no effective intervention. During his life, in 1941, at the age of 59, Wolf died by drowning himself in the river Awas in Laos. The work. Mr. Dalloway, 1925. Mr. Dalloway is one of the best books to start with for those who are just dealing with Virginia Woolf's writing. Clarissa Dalloway is an upscale British woman, and Woolf tells of her life in post-war War I London. Woolf explored society at the time and creates an image of the protagonist's life through his talk as Clarissa prepares a party that she will host the night. This book is an example of the narrative flow of consciousness when the reader is thrown into the Clarissa mind and her world. A sense of intimacy with this character is created. This novel was made into a film in 1997. Second Orlando, 1928. Jorge Luis Borges considered this work of Woolf the most powerful and one of the most unique of the era. Orlando begins with a male protagonist and aristocratic poet who frequents Queen Elizabeth's court. The novel addresses key questions about gender and identity, all against the backdrop of characters traveling through time and meeting important literary figures of all time. Unique and unexpected, Orlando is much ready for any literature fan. Third, To the Lighthouse. The story of three members of the Ramsay family is told from their different perspectives. To the Lighthouse is a touching story about the hardship this family faced while living in a house on the Scottish coast. Woolf's impeccable prose and interpretation of human emotion will have an impact on the reader. He explores the human fear of change in a new and compelling way. Again, his ability to make description come true is one of his best tools in the novel. 4. A Room of One's Own, 1929. In this essay, Woolf investigates the implication of gender and claims that without money and space of their own, women cannot let their creativity and genius run free. A Room of One's Own is an early feminist text and is essential reading for everyone. The exemplify this theory, Loeb's creates an imaginary character, Shakespeare's sister. He gives this character a talent as high as Shakespeare, but the story is not a success. Instead, he commits suicide. The play, frustrated by this inability to reveal his genius in the male-dominated world in which he lives. Five, The Waves, 1931. This book consists of 6 monologues, one by one. Wob used the main character of this book to investigate the concept of identity, individuality, and society. There is a 7th character, Percival, who is also important but doesn't speak directly to the reader. The Waves is a unique work in that its writing style transgress traditional genre boundaries and weaves a cross between poetry and prose. Last, Between the Acts, 1941. Between the Acts, West Virginian Woolf's last work and was published after her death. The novel takes place in a unknown location in England at the outbreak of the Second World War, which spread across the country. A village holds its annual event in a summer house, and the villagers celebrate an important moment in British history. Woolf elaborately touched on certain topics, most of which were related to war. The rise of fascism was very important to her, not only because her husband was Jewish, but also because he was also on Hitler's death list in England. The selected work. Orlando novel by Virginia Woolf, published in 1928. Fantastic biographical novel pays homage to Woolf's family of friends. Vita Sackville was from the days of her ex-star Thomas Sackville. 50, 39, 36 until 6008 to the family country estate in Knoll. The manuscript, a gift from Wob to Sackville, was kept at Knoll. The novel open is 50 80. Young Orlando, a 60-year-old boy, wrote a poem called The Oak Tree. He finds help in Elizabeth Place and love in the hands of a Russian princess. A Katy poet, Sir Nicholas Green, said to be the model for Sir Edmond Gozzi, discussed literature with him. During the reign of Charles XVI until 1685, Orlando was appointed ambassador to Constantinople and was awarded the title of dukedom. One night he stayed with a dancer and Kuchubi woke up. 7 days later Orlando rose, now a beautiful woman. He returns to England and enjoyed the intellectual Society of London in the days of Edison, Dryden, and Pope, but turned to the sordid street life to find relief from this brain disorder. He married to achieve honor during the Victorian years, and by 1928 he had returned to London, where he was reunited with his friend Greene, who offered to find a publisher for the oak tree. Returning to his country estate, he stands under a great oak tree and remembers his adventure over the centuries. The novel is also an affectionate portrait of Sackville West, who, because she is a woman, cannot inherit knowledge. Written in a pompous biographical voice, the book pokes fun at the genre the author is all too familiar with. His father, Sir Leslie Stephen, had edited the Dictionary of National Biography, and his friend, Lytton Strachey, had written the revolutionary Eminent Victorians. Woolf also parodied style of English literature and explored issue of androgyny and women's creative lives. Orlando marked a turning point in the Woolf career. Not only did it diverge from his more introspective works, but his spectacular sales also put an end to his financial worries. Readers praised the book's style, wit, and complex plot. Theme. One of the most important themes in Orlando is the relationship between fact and imagination. In Woolf's review of Harold Nicholson's Some People, he opens with this analogy. If we think of truth as something solid as granite and personality as something intangible like a rainbow, and reflects that the purpose of a biography is to unite these two things into one, a seamless unity, we have to admit that the problem is a rigid one, and we need not wonder if biographers, for the most part, failed to solve it. The granite and rainbow metaphor reports in his own novel when he discusses nature, which has played so many strange tricks on us, making us so unequal from clay and diamond, rainbow and granite, and putting it in a case. Woolf suggests that there is no realm of imagination apart from the realm of fact. Rainbow and granite put in one box. Everything internal and external, fact and imagination, is linked together by our memories, and we will grow to understand when we realize that neither memory nor history can be easily organized and shared. Fact is a subjective equality, and truth emerges when we become aware of the interconnectedness and relativity of everything and everyone around us. It is the unity of experience, not the triumph of facts, that emerge victorious over time. Characterization. The eponymous hero was born as a Malay royal in England during the reign of Elizabeth I. He underwent a mysterious gender change at the age of about 30 and lived for more than 300 years into modern time without visibly aging. As a teenage boy, handsome Orlando plays the courtier in Elizabeth Palace and becomes the old queen's favorite. After his death, he fell deeply in love with Sasha, an elusive and somewhat wild princess in the Russian embassy entourage. This episode about love and ice skating against the backdrop of the frost fire fell on the frozen river Thames during the Great Frost of 1608, when birds froze in the air and fell like stone to the ground. Plot. The novel opened in 1588. Young Orlando, a 60 years old boy, wrote a poem called The Oak Tree. He finds help in Elizabeth Place and love in the hands of a Russian princess. A chatty poet, Sir Nicholas Green, said to be the model for Sir Edmund Gosse, discussed literature with him. During the reign of Charles II, 1616 until 1685, Orlando was appointed ambassador to Constantinople and was awarded the title of dukedom. One night, he stayed with a dancer and could be woke up. 7 days later, Orlando rose, no a beautiful woman. He returned to England and enjoyed the intellectual society of London in the days of Addison, Dryden, and Pope, but turned to the sordid street life to find relief from his brain disorder. He married to achieve honor during the Victorian years, and by 1928 he had returned to London, where he was reunited with his friend Green, who offered to find a publisher for the Oak Tree. Returning to his country estate, he stayed under a great oak tree and remembered his adventure over the centuries. Setting. The extern in Orlando is located primarily in England, so Orlando takes a brief trip to Constantinople, where his exchange takes place. The really big enchilada of the setting is Temescal. The novel begins in the 16th century and ends in the 20th century, allowing us to see how Orlando responds to the different social pressure of different society. This is particularly important during the Victorian era, when the pressure on Orlando to marry is absolutely unbearable. Other than the Victorian time, however, Orlando pretty much does his or her own thing. That thing is typical writing, but Orlando is also deeply invested in nature and the English countryside. Luckily for Orlando, the countryside doesn't change much over the centuries, and this allows him to have a sense of constancy despite this. The scenes and sounds of London also frequently come in as a backdrop to Orlando Ferris shenanigans. Point of view: George Louis Burgess considers this work of Woolf the most powerful and one of the most unique of the era. Orlando begins with a male protagonist and aristocratic fate who frequents Queen Elizabeth's court. The novel addresses key questions about gender and identity, all against the backdrop of character traveling through time and meeting important literary figures of all the time. Unique and unexpected, Orlando is much read for any literature fan. Language style: he begins to find stable origin style to add his work Jacob's Room, 1922, Mr. Dalloway, 1925. The penance of his avant-garde works is evident into the Lighthouse, 1927, and The Waves, 1931, as well as Orlando, 1928, and the book like Easy, a Room of One Honest One, 1929, with the famous dictum, a woman must have her own money and space if she is to write fiction. Mandate: Orlando remained a British aristocrat regardless of gender and culturally adjust to the nomadic lifestyle of the Roman caravan as he wandered across the Balkans and Anatolia. In real life, Sackville was fantasized about joining a Roman caravan, but they didn't really want to give up the life of the established aristocracy to live in poverty or be subject to the same discrimination as the Romans. Woolf also satirized British culture in the sense that inversion, as lesbianism was later called, is allowed as long it is present as a fantastical allegory that is only real in the sense that the book is about Sackville West but cannot be realistic. Woolf also intended this novel to compensate for the sense of loss Sackville West often feels who lost the beloved childhood home of Knoll to a caution and which he would have inherited if he had been a boy, about his need to hide his sexuality and about the unhappy ending of his relationship with Violet Trefusion in 1920. Conclusion: Modern literature is a new style in English literature that is trying to get out of the phase of romanticism and realism. In this 20th century, the development of work after work met with various genres and distinctive themes that are told with unique storytelling techniques has become one of the interesting materials to be analyzed and studied more deeply. Adam Virgin Rob Stephen, 25 January 1882 until 28 March 1941. Was an English writer, considered one of the most important modernist writers of the 20th century and a pioneer in the use of stream consciousness as a narrative device. Orlando novel by Virginia Woolf, published in 1928, fantastic biographical novel, plays homage the Woolf family of friends. Vita's Sackville was from the days of her Augustus Thomas Sackville, 1536 until 1608, to the family country estate in Knoll. The manuscript, a gift from Woolf to Sackville, is kept at Knoll. Thank you.